What's going on, guys? How you doing? We are on to part 2 of this Neil Peart super long interview, hour and a half, from 2015 at Sirius XM. This is part 2. Part 1 was excellent. I think that this interview is about to be just like a mind blower. Already I'm like, oh yeah, I like where all this is going. This is very cool. If you're new here, please subscribe, check out my videos, all kinds of videos, reaction videos, bass videos, music videos, check it out. If you like the channel, you want to support the channel, you can hit super thanks underneath this video. You can hit me direct in the description. I got PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, Amazon wishlist, mailing address, and I do donation request videos just like this one. So if there's something you want me to listen to watch, to talk about, a question, anything, hit me direct, PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, and in the notes section, leave a description, leave a link. Let me know what you want the video to be on, and I'll make the video. Also, you can email me at jpanreadsemail@gmail.com. That's also in the description. All right, guys, let's get into this part 2. Bam.
Well, let's talk about the new book here for a moment.
Yeah, talking about his book.
I'm sorry, before we do, because you brought up something, I don't want to forget this. Writing a book, perhaps unlike working with a band and lyrics, it's a very solitary experience, isn't it?
Yeah, it is initially, but there is good collaboration available there if you're open to it. I love working with editors, for example, which some writers might not say. But yeah, I've had nothing but great experiences in the collaboration of that. And even doing the Clockwork Angels novel, for example, with Kevin Anderson, and then I recorded the audiobook for it. And it was a 4-day experience of sitting in a little studio, not unlike this, and being so careful not to move or make a sound. And I was working with a female engineer and producer, the engineer listening to every sound that came out of my mouth, and the producer watching for pronunciations and voice timbres and all that sort of thing. And the end of those days working together, it's felt like such a tight collaborative unit. That's always my favorite way to work, is in a group, a small group like that. And I was mentioning we've just finished a graphic novel version of Clockwork Angels, and working with Kevin and myself and the editors and the artist. And I called us the Quorum because we were making all the decisions and deciding what was best for the story and all the way along. And I thought, you know what, this is the size of a rock band. There were 5 of us in there. I think most of my working life has been in groups of 3, 4, 5 people creating something together like that. And it's a situation that I love. And I thought maybe all institutions in life should be run by rock bands, including government. If you had 5 people, say, making all the decisions, right, for what was best for the country, what was best for your vision and all that stuff, I think it would probably work.
Oh, man.
Yeah, right.
Okay. All right.
All right, let's talk about the new book, Far and Near on Days Like These, in which you talk at length. I love this at the beginning of the book. You talk at length about the importance of creating a physical object like a book or DVD or what have you, and how much care one should take to get it right. You're very big on making sure that you do it as best you can.
Well, it's something that absolutely reflects in the band's approach, that every show that we do was always the one, and every record we make, comes with the sense of care. And I mentioned in there that if someone's listening to a drum part, I don't expect them to hear paradiddles and polyrhythms and cross-stickings and all the other elements of technique that I worked on so hard. But in the sense of listening to a Rush song or looking at a Rush album when such things existed, or one of my books, people will just receive a sense that care has been taken here. And I think that's a value that when I look at art and paintings or watch a movie even, you get that sense right away that care has been taken here in the making of it, and it puts you at ease, that right away what the artist in whatever medium is trying to reach you for real. They're not trying to fool you, they're not trying to sell you something, they're trying to communicate something with care. And I think that speaks in an intangible way, but undeniably true, that people get that. I remember Nick Hornby, the British novelist, has written quite a bit about pop music, and he says when he talks to someone young listening to music, starting to get into it, he said, whatever you listen to, just make sure they mean it.
Well, that's a great point, and that brings me to the obvious question. Do you think, without naming names, that the current crop of pop musicians who seem to be more concerned, to me, about their choreography and their costume than the music?
The magic word, pop, stands for popular. And then again, another thing I learned from art history and criticism, from my self-given education, though, it was one set of standards from this art historian, Professor Gombrich, who said, how do you judge a piece of art? What are they trying to do, and how well do they do it? If they're trying to be popular and they do it, I guess they win. You know, and that's a perfect example. I drive up and down California quite a lot, and sometimes just bounce around radio stations, you know, as curiosity. And I was driving down through Central California and picked up a hip-hop station from Fresno. And I thought, okay, I'm going to listen to a hip-hop station from Fresno, California. So for 2 hours, I just listened to it, and I had an insight after it. You know, you're not hearing any drumming going on, so that automatically, and same with all pop music, right? There's no drumming in it. There's no drums. So I don't get that personal satisfaction of the element of music that spoke to me most strongly from the beginning. But what I realized listening to these artists whose name you usually only see in the gossip pages, in each case they have a gift that other people can't do. And that is what makes athletics work, that's what makes entertainment work, and why these people can admire someone who can speak a whole bunch of rhymes really fast, because they can't do it, right? It's as simple as that. So all these artists that they like, it's a style that has evolved among their generation. So you can't judge hip-hop music, for example, on rock band standards, but when I listen to it just freshly like that and say, well, what is this made of, and why do people like it? And I realized that as I was listening to all the celebrated artists of that kind of music for 2 hours, mind you, so I was already hearing the same songs again, but I realized, well, yeah, these people have a gift that's inimitable, and that's what makes them work for these people. But when you mention pop music, that is simple, really. Pop music stands for popular. Rock music stands for rock.
If you could hang with rap music for 2 hours, Mister, you're a better man than I.
Well, I have an open mind.
Mister, you're a better man than I.
Wide open.
Okay. In the book, it became clear very soon on that you have an amazing eye for detail, describing everything from the colors of new growth along the roadways in spring to the texture of icy mountain roads and how that would differ. Did you always have this kind of eye for detail, or did it improve with your writing?
Oh, very good question, because yes, I certainly started out as a nature lover, for example, as a small boy, and responded to that, and to reading also was a huge magnet to me as a youngster. And then one of the greatest exercises that I use in writing is I'm riding along on my motorcycle is, how would I describe this in words, right? And oftentimes if I'm wrestling with emotions, and how would I put this in words, is a constant exercise for me that's great therapy. Because one of the things that keeps me as a dedicated letter writer, for example, is a phrase I like to twist around, but it goes, how do I know what I think until I see what I write? So you develop the technique over time, as in music, to convey yourself more clearly. So I play that exercise all the time if I'm looking around at the world as I go by. How does this make me feel, and how would I put this into words? So that is absolutely a childhood influence, but it's informed by, as in music, a dedication to the craft of communicating it more clearly and more movingly, if I can.
Well, because the beginning of the book is almost Michener-esque in its detail. You know, it's like, it kind of reminded me of the opening to Hawaii, you know, where, okay, I got
First there was a volcano.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. But you make it a bit more entertaining than that. I like, this is another thing that I really enjoyed about the book and learned from the book, is I like the fact that you take the time to learn the history of the particular area that you're writing through, like explaining, and I love this, the deforestation of the English oaks, and how those hills used to be covered.
Oh, chestnuts. And the Appalachians, the chestnut was the predominant tree until a blight came from Europe and wiped them out. Yeah. Those are things that I learned through recreational reading, I guess you would say. I'd read quite a lot of novels, literary novels that also include that kind of knowledge in them. So I bring that to me, and then I get curious, and I'll see a kind of plant and go, what is that? And that's one example where I was riding through the East Coast in springtime and kept seeing, before the trees had had leaves or blossoms. These beautiful kind of magenta-colored flowers kept coming out.
Right.
And all through the next couple of weeks, I was asking people, what are those called? What are those called? And nobody knew. And then finally I found out they're called red buds. I was like, oh, okay. So if I can put a name to something too, of course it helps me a lot to define it for other people. And I always say I like to try to write about motorcycling for people who don't care anything about motorcycling. Try to write about nature for people who don't particularly care about nature. If I write about the band, people sometimes, why do you always say your bandmate Geddy? You say, well, I'm writing for somebody who doesn't know who Rush is, you know, as far as I'm concerned as a writer. And so if I can weave history into it, and I've learned too where to leave that alone and say, okay, people, there's some really interesting stories here. I'll leave you to follow up further if you like, but you have to know how far a disinterested reader, as opposed to uninterested, but someone who has no inclination either way, how far you can take them, and then, okay, that's as far as I'm going to lead you, and if you want to go farther, there are many, many, many more stories that I leave out because they're of interest to me for having visited a place and for being in a context of the Midwest or the prairies or the deserts or the mountains, all these regionalisms that I'm so attuned to, both from traveling and from reading. There's a certain level of interest that I can count on, I think, if I can phrase it right, to tell somebody about motorcycling or car racing or birds, you know, my common fixations. And then at a certain point that I know, okay, those people have probably heard enough about hummingbird nesting habits by now.
Well, you went on about, do you pronounce it Gorse, G-O-R-S?
Yeah.
And I found that fascinating. I'd never heard of the plant. I didn't know that after, now this was in England.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, Ireland.
Right, in Ireland. And after
Britain.
Because they lost these forests not only to the Romans, but then when the Romans left, they were building all those ships when England ruled the waves, all out of oak. So that,
in Canada too, in eastern Canada, our main trees were the giant oaks and pines, and they were marked for the British Navy, the Royal Navy. Yeah. Any of them over 3 feet in diameter were reserved for the British Navy for all those ships of the Napoleonic Wars and all that. But more so, when I was traveling, motorcycling through Britain, I was seeing all these beautiful leather, yellow flowered plants at the roadside. And again, what are they? What are they? And finally figured out what it was, and then the history of them. Going back to Thomas Hardy novels and all that, talking about furs, and the Led Zeppelin album cover, just to swing us back to rock and roll here, where the old man with the sticks, that's gorse. And he was collecting firewood because it's a greasy kind of wood that burns really well. And the Romans had used it for harvesting salt. And yes, all of those mountains that I was looking at, why are these mountains bare? Well, they weren't always bare, but for firewood and for building ships and all of that, they were stripped bare and didn't grow back.
And you explained that this gorse has an interesting quality. When it's dried, it becomes oily, and it's very good fuel, and that's why you see people using it and so on. Well, see, now that's something I wouldn't have expected to learn from a rock and roll guy, and I appreciate that. I'd never known.
Yeah, really.
When
he's really smart.
In the book,
he's so
you speak
smart.
a lot about, you have two
anybody
main
that reads as much as he does. I mean,
Brutus,
geez.
The legendary
really
Brutus.
incredible.
Legendary Brutus, and some guy named Michael, some dude named Michael, and what is this guy like to ride with? I mean, you have to spend a lot of time with him. He's a pain in the ass, is what you were telling me earlier, right? I mean, when we were alone, you were just saying that.
No, it's funny. We both abuse each other so constantly that, for instance, one of the assistants that works for me sometimes was talking about it. Says, "You guys talk so awful to each other all the time," and both of us looked at each other blankly, like, "What do you mean?" But we maintain this constant level of abuse so that it never bubbles up into anger or interpersonal tension and all that. But of course, it's a difficult relationship traveling every day through who knows what kind of hardships and weather and all that. So it requires a certain resilience and patience and humor. Oh, does it need humor, to be able to, because that's one thing I've learned in the dynamics of my life. The first thing that happens after tragedy is, guess what? Comedy, right? And the black comedy and horrible jokes that people in terrible situations of grief can make. are wonderful. The essence of humanity and hopefulness, and always seeing the bizarre side, not necessarily the bright side, but the humorous, twisted side of situations is constantly amazing to me.
I feel like I can connect to that. Not everybody likes that.
Yes. Well, also because
sometimes it comes off as inappropriate and
men
wrong and unnecessarily harsh
a way
and
that
all
we
that.
show affection for other men
but
is to bust their balls.
I like that.
My wife is constantly aghast at when I will talk to a friend of mine on the phone, a very good friend of mine who I love dearly, and all it is throwing insults back and forth at each other. And she goes, "Why do you talk to him that way?" I said, "Well, because we're great friends. Yeah. That's the way that we relate to each other."
And if you couldn't do that too, there you raise a very good point about a person in my position too, who you can become isolated, right, and surrounded by agreeers, you know, yes men, and people who bow to your wishes and all that. And people do build structures around themselves like that. Whereas I never wanted that, and as a band we didn't. We were always close with our crew, and in the early years shared rooms with them, and always maintained that relationship where they could insult us if they wanted to, you know, and it keeps you honest. And among my best friends in the business, the people that I'm close to, we do have that kind of abusive relationship where you are able to insult each other. And mentioning Michael, here's a wonderful quote where he was berating me about something, and I said, "I love the fact that you think you can talk to me like that, but I really wish you wouldn't."
Yes.
Right.
I really wish you wouldn't. Oh, God.
But it didn't stop him.
No.
All right. That's part 2. Yeah, this is a great interview so far. This is great. I'm loving this one. This is really cool. I like listening to it. I like hearing it. I don't know, for some reason that other one, it was just different. It was just different kinds of questions. It was more about like a book or something like that. I mean, it sounds like this is a bit about a book too. I don't know if it's about the same book. It sounds like he's got 6 books, right? I know nothing about any of this stuff yet, right? So anyways, yeah, again, there's so much in here. I almost feel like I'm not going to, but I almost feel like I need to stop and just keep, say my piece and then keep going. But I'm not going to do that. Anyways, yeah, that whole thing about obviously it's easier for me to remember the things that just were said than the earlier things. But anyways, what he's saying about, giving each other shit, giving each other a hard time, but also like with the crew and with people that he's working with that are, maybe not, you would think they're not, it's like, okay, we hire you, right? Like, or that kind of thing. Being able to connect in that kind of way with people like that is so important and really makes a difference, not just for you, but for them. And that's going to help make a difference for you. Right? Does that make sense? Because like if who you work, I mean, I'm a bass player. I'm a sideman. So I work for people, right? I get hired to play for you or to do this project or to do whatever, to play this gig, to play these gigs, to be in this group and it's your group and things like that, right? I mean, I've been in bands before where it's like I'm part of the band, we're like a band, and I've been in lots of different kinds of situations, but for the most part, one of the things about being a bass player and being a side musician, a rhythm section player, is that I can just jump into situations and just immediately get paid, right? That's why, like, my dad, who was a guitar player, said, "Play the bass, you'll always have work," and it's freaking been true in my life, right? It has been, right? I've been able to make a living doing music in 3 different states now, right? So there's definitely something to that. I mean, it's kind of this kind of thing. The grass is greener sometimes, but anyways, that's a whole different kind of story. But, I've worked for people where they are super rich, like super freaking rich, but they don't make you feel like you're just the help. And I've also worked for people that are rich, maybe not super rich, but still like, they're doing really well or whatever. I mean, ultimately how rich they are doesn't matter. Honestly, actually, that shouldn't, sorry I brought that up, but, because it doesn't matter. I've also worked for people where it's like, you maybe want to treat your people better, because I can see why you go through so many people. I see why people don't hang around you, you know? It matters. It really matters. It really matters. So I definitely like that and appreciate that. And if you can have that connection, it's just all the better. And I mean, this is also, you know, like, I'm pretty loyal, you know, like I've worked for the people in the bands I've worked for the most part, it's like years, you know, because of things like that. That matters. It really, really matters. And then there have been situations where it's like, I'm not, no, if you, yeah, it's crazy. You can almost see it on my resume, you know, where it's like, oh, he was only in this situation for, I mean, it's not always the case. It's not always the case. But anyways, I really like that. I think that's cool. I think that's cool. I thought the whole pop and hip hop kind of music conversation was interesting. About, you know, he didn't want to, you know, it sounds like he doesn't want to, he's a nice guy, right? Like, I just get the vibe that he's not going to be negative or say nasty things or whatever about, you know, he's going to see multiple ways of seeing things, right? Multiple perspectives, and kind of be like, well, you know, like, no, hang on, I know you. He knows this guy. He said at the beginning of the interview, they've been talking to each other for 20, 25 years at this point, you know, and he obviously knows that he's not into hip hop or whatever, like more current music, right? The interviewer, right? He's even kind of putting off the question in that kind of way. Like, what do you think about the current pop music that seems to care more about choreography and things like that? And Neil's like, hang on, what does pop stand for? Popular, right? If their intent is to become popular and they become popular, isn't that a success? It's like, interesting. That's a perspective maybe probably a lot of people don't think about. And, you know, like, especially you know, like people that give shit about pop music and current music, the state of music right now is just so terrible, this, that, and the other thing. It's like, well, no, there's really great music out there. You just have to find it, what works for you. There are people that like pop music. I mean, shit, my wife is into lots of different kinds of music that I would say is on the more popular end, although she is kind of delving into different things nowadays. But like, especially when I met her, oh yeah, geez, pop music, like the radio stuff that's on current radio, right? Which I'm fine with. There's definitely stuff in there that there was a period, specifically when I lived in California, when I lived in LA, that I would listen to that stuff because you want to know what's current, because it's LA, right? So like, I wanted to know what's current and keep my ear to the ground in that kind of way, right? But then also, I'm a musician and a searcher of music. So I'm always digging for like, okay, what's stuff that I haven't heard before? Oh, I haven't checked out this band before. I haven't checked out this, that, and the other thing, you know, which gets me to Rush now. You know, I mean, there's a million zillion bands that I have not heard. There's too much music. I've said all this before in comments. Anyways, I thought that conversation with the pop music was very interesting. This is something that other people can't do, so that's what makes them successful and more popular and more people into it. Like, wow, you're doing something that people can't do, which is a very interesting thing considering how music is right now in terms of bands and musicians, because there's a lot of, for instance, you know, like there's a lot of guitar players. There's always been a lot of guitar players, but there's a lot of guitar players, right? And there's a lot of excellent guitar players. So but yet there are some guitar players that are not only excellent, but they stand out from everybody else. Not only older, right, like classic great guitar players, but also newer, younger guitar players who are excellent, but doing something different with the instrument, something new, something that other people aren't doing, right? They're like being innovative. And I think that that's really cool. Anyways, I gotta get going because my kid is yelling, and I'm the only one here. He was taking a nap, so I gotta get out of here. Catch me in the next video. I had more to say, but I really gotta go. So sorry, guys. I'll catch you in the next video. You want to tell the people why you're just crying? You woke up mad? You're just mad? Okay, all right. He's fine.